Let's turn to the rule for today, the golden rule, and that is my conscientious self. Observe constancy in love. Observe constancy in love. And we are reminded by this, of course, of the great pair of constant lovers whose constancy is legendary, and that is Layla and Majnun. And different stories are told about Layla and Majnun, but let's recall some of the anecdotes. They were both children together at a school, and already discovered their affinity at that early age. And so whenever Majnun in his lessons read from a book, what he found there was Layla's name, whether or not it was written on the page. That's what he read. And Layla, for her part, when she went to write on the chalkboard, what she wrote was Qais, actually was his name, Qais. That was his name. So they loved each other. But the families weren't congenial and tried to keep them apart. And that only made Majnun depressed. He was later called Majnun more and more. Majnun means crazy. He was crazy with love. His name was originally Qais, but came to be known as Majnun. And they tried to dissuade him. A friend said, well, just look at Layla. She's really not that pretty. How is it that you're so obsessed with her? And he said, but no, you don't see her. To see Layla, you must borrow my eyes. And then his parents took him to the Kaaba, to Mecca, hoping to cure him of this obsession. And they said, pray that this obsession will be removed from your heart. And he answered, if I pray, does that mean I'll meet Layla? And then they said, well, just pray for what you wish. They gave up on things. And so then it happened that because it was clear there was so much love between them, the families decided that they'll have to be married after all. So an engagement party was arranged, and the family of Layla were on their way to meet Majnun, and he was all arrayed in flowers. But then somehow Layla's dog ran ahead of the party and ran into the room where Majnun was, and he was so full of joy to see that dog that he leapt down from his chair and he was just cherishing and kissing and honoring the dog. And then the party of Layla, when they saw that, they thought, we can't allow this marriage. He's crazy. He's insane. He's no suitable partner. Look how he's treating this dog. So it was called off, and Layla was taken to another place. Her family moved away, and he roamed everywhere, wandering about her, looking for her. And then there was a mailman who would travel between villages and take messages. So he said, do you know of the location of Layla? And the mailman said, yes, they've moved to this other town and I'm going there. It's 100 miles away. And he said, well, you must take a message from me. And the mailman agreed. So Majnun started to tell what he wanted to tell Layla. And he kept telling more and more. And the mailman had to he couldn't pause to wait. He had letters to deliver, so he just started to go on toward the village. And all the while, Majnun followed after him, telling all of the things he wanted told to Layla. And in the course of it, they reached the destination, the town where Layla lived. And Majnun had talked the whole time. And so his message to Layla was never ending. And when he reached that village, he retired to a little ruins, a patch of ruins, and waited there. And meanwhile, the mailman told Layla that Majnun has come. So she said, Majnun has come. Well, would you? He must be exhausted from that long journey. He didn't have any food or water. They said, yes, he was exhausted. And then the nurse who was there, the nurse of Layla, said, there's only one cure for that kind of exhaustion, and that is that he would have to drink out of a puddle and hang upside down by his feet. Now, fortunately, that's exactly what he had meanwhile done. Why? Well, he had nothing to drink but water from a puddle. But why did he hang upside down? That's because he wanted to go to sleep, but he didn't know in which direction Layla was, and he didn't want to point his feet that way where she might be. So he had to sleep by tying his feet and hanging from a branch that way. That was his respect for Layla. And it turns out that was the cure for heat stroke in those days. Drink from a puddle and hang from your feet. So there he was in the ruins, and Layla thought, well, he'll need to eat. So she sent a maid to bring food to him. Now it happened there at the ruins, there wasn't only Majnun, there was another fellow who was a kind of bon vivant. And when that happy-go-lucky fellow saw this maid bringing food, and she said, this food is for Majnun, he said, I'll have it, that's for me. So he took it, and she was happy, and she saw, yes, well, he's taking this food, it must be Majnun. There's a very weak-looking person over there who's quiet, and that must be some other person, a strange kind of person. But this one who's taking the food, that must be Majnun. So she came then every day and brought food, and always the same fellow was taking the food again and again, and he would make small talk and banter and things, and always send back his thanks to Layla, but never really inquire about her. And over time, Layla began to wonder, is that really Majnun that's taking all of this food but sending no message? So she said, try this. Go and say that I'm ill and I need some blood for my recovery. And then, so the maid went back to that fellow and said, now, could you offer some blood for Layla who's ill? He said, I'm not Majnun. And he pointed to Majnun. And then they went to Majnun, and he said, yes, of course, anything I would give my life for Layla. And he started to cut himself to provide the blood, but he was so withered, he had no blood. It was only, not even the slightest, was able to squeeze out only the merest drop. And he said, please give that to beloved Layla. Then Layla's, knowing that Majnun was there, Layla's family wanted to move her away still more. And so she came to see him and said that I'll meet you in the wilderness. And she met him there, but it was only in passing. She was being taken onward, and she said, but I'll come again. Meet me here. I'll come again. And he resolved upon it. I'll meet you, I'll wait for you. And there was a tree, a willow tree, and he leaned against it and took his station there and remained there day and night waiting. And years passed, and he waited, and the tree grew into his limbs, and his limbs grew into the tree, and insects made a home in his hair, and he just waited there and remained there and kept reciting the name of Layla. And finally, years later, Layla had the chance at last, and she had been meanwhile pining for him and thinking always of him. Finally she had the chance to go back to the place, and there he was, merged into the tree. She found the tree because there was a woodcutter who said, don't go to that tree, it's haunted. I don't know if it's a man or a tree, but every time I try to cut it, it cries out Layla. She said that must be the place. And she went there and came face to face. Imagine, after all that separation, all of those years apart, and now they were reunited and their glance met. And she said, Majnun, it's me, Layla. And he said, I'm Layla. She said, no, Majnun, it's me, Layla. And he said, then I'm nothing. And the breath left his body. And at that moment, the breath left her body. And they passed away into each other and were buried in one grave, united in the hereafter after being separated all their mortal lives. And despite all of the tribulations and opposing forces that beleaguered them in their souls, staying absolutely true to one another till the end. It's a powerful story, dedication. Not only love in union, but love in separation. Being devoted from a distance. Not letting physical distance become spiritual distance. Being ready to give anything for the beloved and asking nothing for oneself. Living for the sake of the beloved. Not that passing, transitory, ephemeral, whimsical affection that comes and goes, rises and falls, appears and disappears, but that enduring, selfless, devoted, rapturous love. So for the Sufis, Majnun is the guide to the path of love, the one who teaches the fullness and depth of the way of love, of giving one's life over to the beloved, becoming empty of self and full of the beloved. This is what our rule for today urges and reminds us of. My conscientious self, observe constancy in love.